because the screen of familiarity is removed, you're able to see the same realities that you are experiencing, but with better eyes.
Be able to think on a level playing field where your beliefs and my beliefs don't matter, because we can actually talk about someone else's.
A great author is the one that can go closer to the truth of the human nature.
How can you like it if it's not real? And I'm like, because it is real. Like, it is real.
Hello, welcome. My name is Melanie, and this is Richard with a Y. I am really happy today because I have a guest, and it's Maxwell. Maxwell, I met you at Discord through another channel that is Tutu Rumble. And Maxwell also has a channel, a YouTube channel. What's the name of your channel?
So my YouTube channel is Maxwell Reads Fantasy. And the goal when I started doing the channel was to become the balding dude who has lumberjack shirts. Like, you can't really see that. It's really messing me up. Yeah, lumberjack shirt. So that was the goal of the channel. And then obviously first few videos go out, people are swarming in telling me that I need to sort my hair out, and I'm like, they don't realize it, but they've fallen into my trap. Which is having terrible hair. So
that's great. You know, you may just use it, you know.
You may just
use it for your advantage.
Got to. I mean, it's all natural, so
yeah, that's great. I was wondering that. I was wondering, is it natural? You know,
is it natural, or did I make it happen? Did I go to a barber's and say, "Would you mind just making it almost look like I'm losing my hair?" And they've done a good job.
No, completely. That's so funny. I love it. Yeah, I really have liked watching your videos and just interacting with you. So yeah, that's why I asked you to come here and ask the question of the $1 million. Why in the world do we like dragons still when we are balding?
Exactly. Even no matter how balding you are, you can still appreciate dragons. Yeah, no, I mean, it was spooky that we got in contact. You got in contact with me actually because I was on Discord and I was seeing some of your comments on a different book club that we were doing, and I was like, man, I love these comments. They're really good. I really appreciated your energy and how passionate you were about the prose. And I was like, oh yeah, we would get on. And I was going to reach out to you at some point anyway.
That's great.
I told you I'm writing a book myself, and I was hoping that you would be able to sort of have a look at that. And you got in contact with me, so it was all spooky stuff. I think it was always meant to happen.
When you're a YouTuber starting, it's kind of like scary to reach out to other people and be like, hi, do you want to collab?
Absolutely.
So it took me some time, but I'm like, okay, I do like what he's doing. Let me reach out and just create just closer community with other people that also love the things that I love. So yeah, thank you for saying yes to this, and I'm so excited about it.
It's all good. I mean, I'm always happy to talk about fantasy, so we might be here for a while.
Yes, we both talk a lot, which is good. There's not gonna be awkward silence. I do have fun questions for you before we even jump into the main theme. So the first one is, do you remember the first fantasy book you ever like hook you up? Like you pick it up and you were like, okay, I love this.
So the first fantasy book I ever read, I do remember because it's the fantasy book that got me into reading. And if I tell you a few things about when I read it, what it was, maybe you'll be able to guess what it is. So in my head, when I first read this, it had a character in it with a big long robe, and this character sold wands, and the character opened up this robe, and in the robe there were wands galore, and that was one of the characters I remember imagining. And then there was another character at the start who was this blonde lady who could turn into a cat. Do you have any idea what that is?
No idea, because I have not read enough of... Is this...
You've read this book, right? So basically, I couldn't finish it because I was 7 years old. I wasn't the best reader in the world. I wanted to read. I loved the idea of reading, but I wasn't very good at reading. Wasn't very good at picturing anything in my head, and it took one thing to happen to unlock that, right? And that was going to the cinema to see Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, or Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. You are. That's the book I'm talking about. For some reason, I was imagining Ollivander as this bloke with a big long robe and a load of wands, and that never happens ever, but for some reason, anyway, I picked it up again after I'd read that, and I never had a problem picturing anything ever again, and that is the one that really captivated me and made me fall in love with fantasy, basically.
That's great. For me, it was, I'm trying to think, because like, I'm sure I read some fantasy books when I was younger, but it never like got me completely. Sadly, my parents thought that fantasy was just bad and was gonna make me, I don't know what. Well, it was gonna make me, I don't know. I have no idea why they thought it was a bad thing. But especially not like soft fantasy, but like wizards and stuff. It was like a pure no. Dragons, no. Now they know that that wasn't something bad. But during the time when I was growing up, I was prohibited from watching um all that stuff. But I think I won't tell you which one was the first one that got me into fantasy, because I have another question and I want to reveal it there.
Yeah, okay,
But
yeah, sure.
besides that first one, what got me into fantasy now was reading a very bad book. It's called Ember in the Ashes. And it's kind of like romantasy, fantasy. I don't know. It's 50-50. And it was
I thought you was going to
involved
say it's 50 Shades of Grey. You meant yeah, it's 50,
no.
50, yeah.
Kind
A
of a
different
fantasy
50,
book
completely
too.
different 50.
50-50 in fantasy and romance. But I think it was badly
Right,
written.
yeah.
I think the world was badly built, but it just made me think there must be a better book about this. And I liked it, like the image, as you said, like having the image in my mind, like this. It sounds like good, and it's like reaching out to be good. And then that's when I pick up Miss Bourne, and my life changed.
Love it. Love Brandon Sanderson, love Miss Bourne.
It's
Um,
he's the best.
a great book, honestly. I appreciate Brandon Sanderson as a person, and I appreciate him as an author. And he kind of like,
Mm.
I feel like what Brandon Sanderson taught me was that you should never be, you should just go and write. Like, don't worry about what you're writing. Like, there's a video he did in like 2014 when he did like a live stream, and he live streamed himself writing, and it made me realize that actually writing is just the act of writing. You shouldn't just be sitting there judging yourself, overthinking every single thing that you're writing. It's just sit and write. And I was watching him write these words, and I was thinking, he's just doing it, and I kind of took a lot of inspiration from that when I write my own stuff.
That's great. I do love writing, and it's true that you just have to do it sometimes. If you just there's one important part, and it's reading a lot. If you're not reading a lot, you don't have the tools to write. But after you're reading, you have to just go ahead and write, and that's pretty true. Another question I have for you. So, what was the last fantasy book you read, and why did you pick it up?
So the last fantasy book I read was Clash of Kings, and I picked it up because I've been meaning to read A Song of Ice and Fire from start to finish. I've read A Game of Thrones more times than I can count, and wife always jokes with me that I always I want to finish a series, but I end up reading book one in the series about 100 times because I always like to start again whenever I do the run. So I've done The Game of Thrones a lot. And then when I found out that Richard Austin from Two to Ramble were reading it, I was like, oh, I need to. This is the time. And so yeah, I've just read A Clash of Kings, which isn't as good as A Game of Thrones. It was okay. It's building to something. I've seen the TV series, so it's a very weird way to read something. Sort of knowing which way that one goes. But yeah, no, I really am enjoying that series, and I can't wait to get back to it. And it's George R. R. Martin's kind of ability that makes me so jealous that he can literally just use a line of description to do like 100 different things. His world building is so insane because no line is ever wasted. You're not just reading about the world, you're reading about other things at the same time, and it's just the world building in it is just, I think, some of the best I've seen so far.
That's so cool. I want to read those too. I have such a long list because as I'm new to fantasy, I have an immense reading list. So all the time I'm like, oh, this one and this one and this one. And there's people on my TikTok that, because in my TikToks I have the biggest interactions, and like people are like, you have to read Secret History, so you cannot. And I'm like, okay, I'm gonna read it. And they're like, no, just read this one. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna read it. So I'm just like everywhere.
Like when you get into fantasy, Brandon Sanderson exists, which means that not only is there loads of great fantasy, but you also have the Cosmere to contend with, and everyone's like, read this and read that, and you're like, okay, where do I start? What do I do? And before you know it, like your list is so big.
Yes, that's where I am right now. Okay, and then one last question before we jump to the actual question why we're here today. And is, what's the one fantasy book you'll never admit you liked?
Well, I had to have a think about this one. I really did. Because, like, there's not a lot of things I am against having liked. There are things I can think of, right? When I was a kid, teenager, I read Twilight. At the time, I think I liked it. I think I might have liked it. I did read New Moon afterwards. In fact, no, I think I read New Moon first, and I was like, what is going on? And then I read Twilight. I liked Twilight, but I didn't like New Moon. I remember thinking, when is this ever going to start? But I liked Twilight. I believe there was a time in my life. This is big admissions here. Obviously, gonna get flooded with comments, of course. But I did once feel like I liked Twilight, and I think that might be the one, probably the most embarrassing one.
It's funny because that's mine one.
Is it as well yours? Yeah.
I love Twilight the first time. I love Twilight the second time. I'm not gonna lie. I read Twilight when I was.
Kind of didn't love it forever. I kind of basically I think I got into Twilight because at the time I was starting to get to know my girlfriend, who is now my wife, and I was like, I want to kind of know what she likes, and I started reading that, and I was like, oh, this is good. And then the twist was that it turns out she doesn't even like it. I was like, I've been hoodwinked.
I wonder what I would think now, honestly, but I read it when I was 22 and I still like it, so I don't know.
If you like it, I've got to ask you though. Are we allowed to talk spoilers about Twilight in this situation? If we can't, then because I've got to ask you.
Tell me, and I'll see if I have to mute it.
You might need to. It is a big spoiler, so.
Okay, let's maybe not say it, just in case someone has not read or watched.
I will say it in a non-spoilerific way, but the way that the werewolf character's story goes, was that not just a little bit odd?
It was odd. No, friend, I think everything in that book was pretty odd. You know, I'm not defending the book.
By the time you get to that book, you're just so used to it, but I suppose.
Yeah. In the movies, let's not even get there. I don't know if you have watched the movies, but they're just a parody. Like, it's just, but it's okay. That's my book that I like. Yeah, I'm with you. I liked it when I read it. I don't know if today, but well. Okay, let's actually jump to the question for today. So, again, we take for granted that we like fantasy, but there are so many things that we have left behind when we grew up. And fantasy is not one of them. We still like it. We still talk about it. We do like videos about it. We like a teenage wizard with magic swords. So why is that we are so fascinated about this? That is a childish thing that has nothing to do with the real life. So I will pass the question to you first. Your first thoughts that you have on that.
Why do we love fantasy?
Yeah, why do you like fantasy?
I would say that I am absolutely terrified of the world. I deal with like a real bad anxiety disorder, which causes my brain to literally be a battlefield. And so I enjoy fantasy because it allows me to get away from that, but also to learn from the characters that battle things. Like, and I'm thinking, you know, like they inspire me. Like I won't lie, I once had a panic attack because I had a ready salted crisp. That's a true story. I ate a ready salted crisp. I had a panic attack. I couldn't even deal with a ready salted crisp, let alone killing a dragon. So it's nice to see someone that can kill a dragon, and they probably could also eat ready salted crisps. But no, honestly, jokes aside, like they really inspire me, and they show me how I can, you know, live through them to be able to learn new things about me and be able to grow and offer me a level of hope that one day I will also be able to be a bit like them and fight my own battles, you know?
That's beautiful. I love it. I think, yeah, that's one of the things for me too. I really like being able to live life through them. There's something that C.S. Lewis said. He said that with fantasy and with just stories, we are able to live a million lives without to actually live them. But at the same time, we experience what they experience from the safety of where we are, and we grow with them, even if we don't actually are going through the same things they are going. I always joke that I have 3 older sisters, and each of them had at least 2 or 3 relationships before they got married with other people. And I learned so much because I was in their same room and I was going through their issues and all their mistakes. Then I have to now learn my own mistakes, but at least their mistakes I have checklists because I went through them through my sister's experiences. And I think something similar can happen with stories, and is that we go through those experiences and we grow with them even though we are not living those things ourselves. So yeah, that's really good.
Yeah, we can absolutely learn from that. And like you say, you were learning from your sisters, but like you were learning from your sisters by sort of judging their situation, the situation and the choices that they made, and you're learning from the choices that they made. And you're taking that and you're critically analyzing what they did. And you're right, this is exactly what we do with stories. We critically analyze characters' choices. We think, what would I do in that situation? How would I deal with that? I'd probably just throw the ready salted crisp at the dragon and not eat it. That will save me a panic attack.
This brings me to something that fantasy has been accused of, and I wonder what you think about that. And I have a couple quotes of other people that have answers to this. But like, fantasy has been accused of being an escaping, so like as if you're hiding from your reality. So you just said like it's the real world is very scary, so sometimes you just need to like go away from it. But is that like the right thing? Where like when the things are going a little crazy, is it right to hide under your bed? So like some people have accused fantasy of being a type of escaping the world, kind of neglecting your reality. So I know it's a little deep, but like, would you think like that's a fair judgment?
I would say that I live about 95% of my life in escapism. I'm in my head a lot, and that escapism sometimes is by reading stuff, by watching stuff, and by playing stuff on video games, and also by writing my own stuff. And I would say that that isn't the best thing in the world. I think it's an interesting one because I think you can actually coexist with escapism. And I think the escapism can actually encourage you to try new things and do new things. So I actually disagree. I think for me, fantasy makes me want to be more like those characters, makes me want to go out and do those things. So yes, I'm using it to escape, but I'm also using it to grow. I'm learning new things. There's a scene, this isn't a spoiler, it's from like the first chapter, first page stuff from Game of Thrones. But there's this scene that kind of like made me cry the day I read it, and it was a scene between Eddard Stark and his son Bran. And Bran says he was talking about this man that had just been executed, and he said he seemed kind of scared at the end. And the man and Eddard says, he was very brave. And Bran's like, well, how can you be brave and scared? And then Eddard goes, that's the only time you can be brave. And I'm like, man. I was like, this is true. Like, I'm scared so much. Like, I can't even tell you how much I am scared, right? I get scared so easily by stupid little things.
Same.
But when I am in those moments and I am doing things that make me uncomfortable, because that's something you have to do when you're struggling, when I'm going through that and doing that, like, that quote comes to mind and I'm thinking, you're being brave right now. Like, this is you being brave. When you're scared and doing the thing that you're scared of, that is you being brave. And I learned that because I sat and took the time out to read Game of Thrones. And yes, it was an escape from our world. And sometimes I just need a bit of time away because this world is overwhelming. But at the same time, it's what you take from that escapism and bring to the real world. So I would actually think that, I don't think it is. I think it can be used as a way of escaping. Although I would say that, because I play video games as well, I would say that can definitely be more of an escape, as in that sucks you in and keeps you there. Nothing against video games, I love them too. But I think with video games, you get the pseudo idea that you're achieving something, like you're building something and you're getting dopamine hits and stuff. Whereas with reading, you're learning something a lot.
Yeah. So there are other things that you need to be a little bit more careful with. when you like become an addiction to everything in excess is bad, and everything that will prevent you from socializing and being with your wife or your kids, like it's going to be bad if you don't give time to those relationships. But definitely I disagree that escaping in the books is ignoring your life. There's, I forgot his name, but he commenting on the Lord of the Rings, he was saying, when I close the book, I feel the world more real than when I open it. It's not like I close the book and I'm like, oh no, there are not fairies, there are not elves. It makes you see the world with more wonder than you saw it before. It just like enchants the world. I don't know what's the word for that. Like it makes the world enchanted after you read the stories. And there's actually a quote from Tolkien, and just explaining the idea of escapism. And he said, "Why should a man be scorned if, finding himself in prison, he tries to get out and go home?" What he was trying to say is there's two types of escaping. One is you're escaping from good things, and that's bad, like if you're hiding under your bed. And the other one is if you're escaping to freedom. And for him, reading about books is escaping to freedom and just making the world outside more real, because you are learning, as you said, like these things about bravery and love. So when you close your book, you're able to go outside and just, see it in a better light and understand the real world better and love it better.
No, I agree. And I think, it's really amazing when you can find something that connects so deeply to real life as well. Because, like, the fact is that fantasy is created by human beings. And those human beings all have lived lots of different lives. And they're giving you the opportunity to have a little glimpse into what their life and their perspective is. And so, in a weird way, while we might be escaping to these fantasy worlds, we're actually able to reflect on our own world quite a lot better than, than we were.
Yeah.
And it's really good. I mean, I don't know, I'm sure you've been through the experience where you find a book that, like, you feel like it knows you better than you know yourself. Have you been through that experience? Found a book that made it, like, what was your book?
I feel like Mistborn. Now Mistborn is my favorite, but especially Mistborn. Last half of the second book of the Era 1, and then the book 3 for sure. The characters. I won't say what characters, so it's not a spoiler of who's alive and who's not. But a couple of the characters are exploring their true identity, and they thought that it was a humble thing and a good thing to just kind of hate themselves. I'm not a fan of like, oh, just go love yourself and just. I do think you should love yourself, but I also have never liked that overemphasis. I have felt like, oh, that's a little like egocentrical. But I think the book made me. Sorry, I think the book made it like a good balance between really not despising who you are, because that's a gift too, and it's a good thing. And yes, there are mistakes that should be corrected, but it's a gift. What you have received of the type of person you are, and so like it was really, really impactful for me to see them go through exactly the same things that I was going through, and just how they overcame it. It was really helpful for my own life.
Absolutely. I feel like there is a degree of toxic positivity where you can push yourself to be positive all the time, and sometimes you just need to allow yourself to accept the negativity and also kind of not push yourself too hard to always try and hit that positive need. Like, the thing is, in believing that you must love yourself, there's also a paradox to that, and that is if deep down you don't feel like you love yourself, suddenly you're in a bit of a spiral in the middle. And
yeah.
Do I like myself? Do I not? But if I don't like myself, is that bad? Now I dislike myself for disliking myself more. Like, come on now. Let's, at the end of the day, we're not like, we're humans. We're not, going to be consistently one thing. So yeah, no, I can totally, get on board with that. That way.
Is there one that you feel that it's you like you identify with?
One that I identify with the most. I'm trying to think, really. I do think that, there's a lot of books that have little snippets where I'm like, oh, they know me. It's like I said about Edward, like, literally, whenever I see someone who is scared overcome something and become brave, it makes me think so deeply about that, and how anything like that makes me feel like it knows me a bit better, because it knows how badly I want to get through this sort of situation in my life, and watching all these characters. So I don't think there's one specific that jumps to mind. Like, if I can say like one that's kind of like a series that has made me fall in love with it. It's not like a book or anything, and I mean, it's technically not fantasy, it's an anime, but Yu-Gi-Oh! Back in the day when I used to watch that, I still love it to this day, and I felt like it gave me the friendship and understanding of friendship that I didn't have when I was a kid. I didn't have many friends when I was a kid, so when I was watching YouTube, I'm a bit old for having watched YouTube when I was a kid, but basically Yu-Gi-Oh! Really taught me that, and I felt like it knew the kind of friend I wanted to be before I even understood that. Yeah, it's like all these things, they just influence you. They influence your way of thinking, they influence how you're going to grow. My nan was one of these people who did not like any kind of fantasy fiction at all. Like, she was just like, how can you like it if it's not real? And I'm like, because it is real. Like, it is real. Like, everything that you're seeing is a metaphor for reality.
I love that you say that, because there was who wrote it? I think it was C.S. Lewis, also in his diaries. He was writing about a moment that he was walking with Tolkien, because of course these two humans were friends, and Tolkien and C.S. Lewis were walking, and one day, and C.S. Lewis told Tolkien, like, they were talking about Greek myths, and he was like, those are not real. And what Tolkien's answer was, they are not untrue. And it was like a difference between, it's true that it didn't happen, but it's not true that they are not true. These are realities in a fantasy world, yes, but they are talking about the reality of this world in our what if in another universe. All these ideas of morality and just what means what reality is. I don't know if you read The Lake of Heaven when we read it for the book club. You didn't read it?
No, I didn't read it. No, it's quite short though. I should really have read it, shouldn't I? I will put it on the to read list.
You should read it. It's easy to read. I read it it's like 5 hours, one sitting, so it's not that hard. But the point is that is guests talking and just like wondering about like the foundations of reality. It's a little philosophical, but these books are getting to it, so they are not real as history, but they are not untrue. And yeah, that's really beautiful. There was something else I was gonna add, and to this idea of escaping. Chesterton, he wrote a book called Orthodoxy, and he was explaining why we need specifically fantasy, because like, if you think about it could be like fiction too. So any fiction, just historical fiction, could give us this of living through, and I love it. I love historical fiction too. So it's not that I like don't think it's good, but like, he was trying to like understand why fantasy is what we like a lot, and not only historical fiction. And what he was saying was that we have lost the wonder for this real world because we're so familiar to it that we don't see the sky as amazing as it is. Like, well, in Mistborn, their sky was red, and for them it wasn't like, wow, a red sky. Like, that was what they knew. For us, reading it is an amazing world, like the mist and all this stuff. Like, but we have lost the wonder in our own world that is already out there, but we don't see it anymore because we're so familiar to it. And he was saying, like, when kids are like 4 and under, you can read them a normal book. It doesn't need to be a fantasy book. Every book will make them wonder. Like, it will be like, wow, this is great, because they don't know nothing. For them, everything is new, everything is wonderful. But then when we start growing up a little bit, we need something to enchant our books so that the familiarity can be removed, and we can actually like see better what is in front of us and just love it more.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And to add what you said about the books that you read to children and things, I've got a young daughter, and I will read to her, and yeah, I've actually had that thought cross my mind a few times. Like, this is so mundane stuff. Like, there's so many mundane things, but actually, in her eyes, the idea of doing all these things, like there's books called Topsy and Tim, and they're all about these kids that just do normal kid stuff, right? They go to school and they get nits in their hair. There's one where they get chicken pox. There's one where they go to the beach. And like to her, this is like crazy. She's like, oh my god, kids do this, and she like I can see in her, she so badly wants to experience all these things that obviously as adults we've already experienced. So naturally we're gonna need a dragon or two to be able to pull us through with a bit of wonder, you know?
Yeah, and see the normal things in those that happens with those dragons better, because like when we see it in a family, let's say a book about a family, right, and it's just this family and they're having some family issues. We are so familiar to families that we don't see the ethics behind it, the morality behind it, because we ignore it in a normal world. But when you put the same family in space, in planets, I don't know what, because the screen of familiarity is removed, you are able to see the same realities that you are experiencing, but with better eyes. You're not like covered by the familiarity of it.
This makes me think of a thing called the confirmation bias, which is that when a human believes something wholeheartedly, they will believe it no matter what. They will look for evidence to support the belief that they have. Even if genuinely brilliant, amazing evidence falls from the sky and it is given to the person, the human's confirmation bias will delete that they've seen that and find something that pushes in the direction of that. And I feel like the confirmation bias can be very difficult. Means it's very difficult for us to be able to communicate with each other, because sometimes your beliefs aren't going to line up with my beliefs, whether that be religion or politics or anything, right? But then when you, like you say, that literally deactivates confirmation bias, and then it allows us to then be able to think on a level playing field where your beliefs and my beliefs don't matter, because we can actually talk about someone else's separate belief.
I love that. I love that. That's exactly what happens with Mistborn. You are reading Mistborn, and there are a bunch of beliefs there. I'm sure Brandon Sanderson has his Mormon ideologies there, but they are not. They are just this story, you know. So
we never talk about politics or religion, but like in Mistborn, Brandon Sanderson gives himself permission to do that. You know, no person wherever they sit on the thought process of religion can read that book and they can take it in, and they won't feel angry or frustrated or like it's attacking any of their own beliefs.
Yes, because it's not. It's a Cosmere. So that's just the story. That's my problem, and I have said this a lot in this podcast, but in this channel. But is that I dislike when books are too allegorical, and it's because immediately I put a wall in front of me, or the reader will put a wall as soon as they realize that the book is just talking specifically about their own country or another country, or like just a common event, that's something that is happening today. I think that it doesn't serve the author. So they can do it if they want, but I don't think it helps them when they are too obvious that they are referring actually to the US government, let's say. That doesn't help the reader take what they're receiving or they're like being given, because if they don't agree with the author, as soon as they realize that that's what the author is doing, they will be like, oh no, I don't, you know, and they won't be open to receive what the author has to give.
Yeah, we don't want no books out there with a character called Donald Trump, because that would be a little bit too on the nose.
Yeah.
This is I read this in the newspaper recently. No, I don't think. I mean, I agree. I like worlds that feel real to me. I like worlds that feel lived in, and that people have taken the time out to, like, you know, think about humans in a way where everybody is allowed to be like morally grey. I enjoy a morally grey character, because I don't think there's such thing. I always say there's no such thing as a nice guy. I think we all have grey in us. Like, there's a difference between not being nice and being kind, if that makes sense. And I really like it when characters that we read aren't perfect, and that they have flaws, because like we too have flaws. Because, like, you know, I was saying earlier that these characters that I love will come and they'll fight their demons and physical demons sometimes. I don't think I'd be able to be connected to them if they didn't show me that they had flaws, because I have flaws, and I think a huge part of of being a person is accepting and understanding your own flaws and learning how to work with your own flaws, and whether you need to grow out of those flaws, or whether those flaws are just inherently you and you need to just embody them in a way where you can sort of complement the world. And I think when you read books and you've got characters in them that have got really deep flaws and they do things totally wrong, that you're like, I can kind of emotionally understand the context as why they did it, but it's not good that they did that. I think that's much better than an allegory, to be honest.
Yeah, yeah. I will not ask you this though. We will pass to the next thing, but like I will ask you this before. Have you read The Lord of the Rings yet?
I have read about a quarter of Lord of the Rings. I have done myself a disservice, but when I decided to sit down to read it, I got a really bad case of the flu, and it set a really bad memory. What was started out as a really cozy Hobbit and Lord of the Rings thing. I did read Lord of the Hobbit. I was moving on to Lord of the Rings, and as I was moving on to Lord of the Rings, I ended up getting the flu, and I was out with it for 3 weeks, and then I've never brought myself to go back to Lord of the Rings. But I will have seen all 3 of the extended edition movies, though, so we're okay. I know enough.
Okay, that's good. Okay. So you know the story. Well, what I was gonna ask is, what do you think about those characters then? Because there are some characters that are just good, and some characters that are just bad. Do you like that type of characters?
I think there is room for those type of characters. I love a good character to hate. Like, I love characters that you really don't like because they are really horrible, and then all of a sudden you become invested because you want to read to see how they'll get defeated, and you're like, I need to see this person's comeuppance. So I think I think morally grey characters allow me to connect with them much deeper than characters that are just really good or really bad. I actually think you can either be morally grey or a villain, and I'll like you. But if you are just really good all the time, then I won't connect at all to that character. So, like an evil villain, like the Joker in The Dark Knight, I love watching him because you're like, what is he going to do next? Like, he's crazy and you don't know what he's going to do. And he's not even morally grey. He's just genuinely evil with no remorse. And that in itself can be quite, can be fun. However, I find it very difficult when a character is created that is pure evil and then they're meant to be redeemed, and you're like, hang on, there's no remorse at all, and then all of a sudden redemption out of nowhere. Yeah, you need to really work hard for your redemptions, I think.
Yeah. So for me, it's kind of the same. I do like morally great characters, especially if they are humans or human-like people. If they are Sauron from Lord of the Rings, I'm fine with them being pure evil. But if they are, or Aslan in Narnia, like that's supposed to be a super good character. But if they are just like a normal thing, a normal human, like let's say Gollum, again in Lord of the Rings, he is not purely evil. He is almost consumed by his evilness already, but he's not purely evil. So I like him being like that, a little morally gray, because I can see things about myself in him.
Yeah, I feel a lot of pity towards him, actually. I feel a lot of pity. He feels like a character that that no one really understands, and I've been the person that no one understands. So it's like, I think I can see that in Gollum, and I agree. I can definitely connect to that character.
He's a tragic character because he not like a tragic hero whatsoever. He's just a tragic character in the sense that he was he has been just so destroyed by his own evilness and by bad decisions. So we don't excuse him. He's bad and he did really bad stuff, but it's really sad to see him not being able to get redeemed at the end. So that's spoiler, I guess.
Never grows, and it's like, that is a spoiler. But like the fact that he never grows is sad. Because and you almost think he's gonna grow. There are places where you are literally given a glimpse of the fact that he could actually grow, and then he doesn't, and it's very sad. But it's sometimes just how it is, isn't it? And you mentioned Aslan being a very good character there, and I gotta say, with someone like Aslan, I think it's like where they are positioned as well in the story is like, it means a lot. Like, I don't think Lord of the Rings could have starred Gandalf as the main character because it would have been too easy, right?
Yeah.
So I do believe that where they are positioned as well. I still don't like, very, very good, very good. I feel like, I think even if you explored Aslan, I feel like you'd probably find him making mistakes and having moments. And even like
I don't
I'm gonna
know.
go slightly biblical here, but like isn't there a moment in the Bible, there is a story of Jesus getting frustrated with people that are, I don't know the full story, but like they're like
Yeah.
selling stuff and just like
Yeah,
flips
yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah.
So
I
even
wouldn't
Jesus
say
has
that
moments.
yeah.
Like
I wouldn't call those mistakes, but definitely human emotions.
an emotion. Yeah, exactly. Just
Yeah.
showing an emotion,
Yeah.
showing humanity.
Yeah, yeah,
Um
yeah.
but either way, I think even Jesus, who is a figure, shows
Yeah.
moments of his key emotions.
I don't know if I'm ready to say that Jesus had mistakes, but I definitely would say that Gandalf had mistakes that were even though he was really good, really, really, really good, he didn't know everything. Even though he know a lot, he didn't know everything, and he did things that were wrong. And sometimes he would get angry, a misplaced anger that he would then be like, "Poor Hobbit, he just didn't know."
Absolutely,
you
yeah. I
know?
think if you're gonna follow someone, you need to almost see yourself in them. And I, like including like Gandalf, for example, I am not perfect. So when I see someone else who is not perfect, I feel like I
Yeah,
can learn from that person. Whereas
yeah,
like it's like what you say about like what you would say about say if this is going away from Jesus now. I'm not connecting this with
yeah,
Jesus.
yeah,
Like I would never take advice from someone that hasn't been through what I've been through, if that makes sense. That's something I live
mm,
by. Like,
yeah,
I'm not gonna like say go and get a mortgage if someone hasn't already gone and got a mortgage. Like if this person's never had a mortgage in their life and they're saying you should totally do this, like I'm not gonna take their advice because they don't know anything about getting, having a mortgage.
yeah,
And humans experience life. And if I can't see that human has experienced something like I have, then it's very difficult to connect to that human, including that character, if that makes sense. So I guess I'm not talking about mistakes or like
yeah.
flaws. Like I'm actually talking more about just seeing that little moment of something that you've done wrong. Also, I don't think there's anything wrong with mistakes. I think you've got to grow from them and learn.
Yeah, yeah. No, I'm totally with you there. I totally
Shouldn't have
agree.
brought Jesus into it because then it becomes awkward. Yeah,
But
let's just
even
call him
with
Kelsey from now on.
even with Jesus, like I agree. I agree that he does things that are human and we can see ourselves in him, and he was a human when he came to Earth. So another reason why people say that they like fantasy and that fantasy is good for them is because and we have talked a little bit about this, but I have a couple of funny questions for you. And it's because they have like emotional connection with this character. So you said something like you would feel connected as a friend to them when you were younger. Have you felt identified with a character that you wouldn't like to admit you're identifying with that character? Like you're like, ooh,
Have you ever heard of the TV series You?
yes.
So the character Joe Goldberg is a terrible character to see anything of yourself in because he is just a monster. And in the books, he is worse. But I think his fears and insecurities are something that I think all of us can understand,
Hmm.
if that makes sense. So I wouldn't say I see myself in him because I'm like everything he does is abhorrent and I would never go down those routes. But I'm seeing him think things through because of fears and anxieties that I understand. He just wants to be loved. That is like at the heart of it. This character wants to be loved, but he's also terrified of losing control. Now I don't do any of the stuff that he does 'cause it's bad. I don't know what he does, but he's horrendous. He's an
Yes,
awful human
yes.
being. But I understand what it feels like to be scared of losing control. I also understand what it feels like to want to be loved.
No, I totally get you. Like the character that I felt identified with, and I was in horror while I'm reading this book. I'm like, oh my goodness, almost till the last couple of chapters. I'm like, I'm him. I'm this horrible human, and then he became worse, and I'm just like, okay, I'm not him. And it's Snow from the Hunger Games.
So I actually bought that the new book recently. I've never read
Okay.
Hunger Games ever, and I'm very excited to see
Oh,
what you
you
mean.
should.
I'm
Yeah.
doing I'm doing a video, I think. Look at me just like marketing now. No, I'm doing a video where I'm gonna read them in chronological order because I've never read them and I don't know anything. I'm going in blind. I literally know nothing. So I
Okay.
can't wait to see. Snow and be like, that's Melanie. She's just Snow, right?
Yeah, no. I was reading this book and I'm like, oh my goodness, because he would get frustrated with people. He had some friends that he's like, that he would like just bear their presence. It's not like I'm just bearing the presence of some of my friends, but there's people that I'm just like, I'm polite, but it's not that they're my favorite humans. And just some stuff that he like anger or whatever, and I'm just like, yeah, like maybe he's more selfish, but I could see a lot of things on, like I could understand, not that I could see myself like doing those things, but I could understand him a little bit too well. But then I just think he's not a reliable narrator. So that's why you can identify a little bit more with him, because he rationalizes his feelings. Um so I think that was the reason, I hope. But there's a point that he becomes the Snow, the horrible Snow of the Hunger Games, and yeah, definitely I cannot identify with that beast whatsoever. Not that I'm the best person in the world, but definitely I'm not Snow.
At least
But
yours is a character, and like yours is just like, I don't identify with this guy who like lives in a world where the Hunger Games exist, and mine is just like, might slightly identify with this horrible online stalker who's also a serial horrible nasty person. So I think you win this one. I probably should have gone to see it. Now I've just sort of outed myself. But no, I think what it is though with both of these characters is that but they work really well as well. But for us, and why we connect to them in some way. For one, you're right. Bad characters, just like humans that are doing bad things, do tend to try and rationalize in their head why they're doing what they're doing. And it's the same for Joe Goldberg. He's constantly trying to like tell himself that he is the hero of this story, he's a good person, and that the character that he's trying to romance needs him in some way. He just really has this heightened sense of who he, like tries to convince himself that it's all for the greater good.
yeah,
But I think what we probably relate to, me and you, is more so the underneath that is like the foundation that leads to them turning this way. It's
yeah,
like what like our own insecurities were then met with this evil dark side. Then they become these characters. We're not really saying we are these characters, but there's certain little elements that they do, and you're like, oh, okay, that's understandable.
yeah, and it's a call to caution, because if we have the roots for what made them grow that way, then we have to be careful not to let those roots grow, and just go into the why fantasy matters. And it's because you're able to see in this unfamiliar world this familiar character, and you can see back and what led them to the point that they are, and you can be cautious of, I cannot let this grow. Like this part of me that is, it seems that it's not that big of a deal, and I can rationalize it, and I can be like, wait a second, this could lead to a Hitler. So let me just be careful not to like follow those steps and not let those things grow. So yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot to learn. There's a lot to learn from because that's the thing, isn't it? Because like fantasy and stories in general just allow you to see all aspects. You see people who are going through what you're going through. You see people who failed to overcome what you're going through, and you see people that have spectacularly beaten the odds. And like you seeing all these different facets is amazing, because then you just get to learn all the different stories. And like you say, cautionary tale: don't go down the route of don't be Joe Goldberg or Snow. Just don't do that. That's not
Just on. It will be good not to.
yeah.
I Yeah, and it also helps you see what other people are like that, and where that can lead, especially like with politicians. It's you cannot know how a politician will end up being, but if you compare them to a politician in a story, now you know what like that type of character can lead to bad stuff. And not making a political claims in this video. Just saying like it helps to things like that, or even a person that you want to date, you can see, well, they seem very nice, but they sound a little bit too much like this character. And I think it might, I'm not saying like you're gonna go and judging people with your characters, with your fantasy characters, but But it is a good way of learning how to understand people and see in a good way and a bad way where they can end up.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Love that. And I love that, honestly. Sorry, I love
No,
that
no, go
about
for
fun.
it. Yeah.
Um, I think it's such a good way of being able to examine the world, and it just like it just opens up dialogues that need to be had sometimes as well,
Yeah.
in the real world. But of course, that might lean too close to allegory. But then there is a way of opening up those dialogues without being an allegory, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think it's 100% possible to have a book that is applicable and is not completely allegorical. And I think that's what Brandon Sanderson has done great, what Tolkien has done in a great way. And his Tolkien's books especially, they are so applicable. Like you're just reading them and you're like, oh my goodness, this means this and this and this, but they are not. They're just the fantasy world. He's not talking about, and he said it in a lot of his letters. I was reading them, and people were like, is this about World War II? And he's like, no. This is about Sauron. It's not about Hitler. And I he was just, no, this is just a story. The thing is that a very good story will apply to everything. And it's not that they are trying to, they just will.
I also think that there's a level of like biographical, like I said to you earlier, like these are created by humans, and like with J.R.R. Tolkien, obviously he lived through the war, so he might subconsciously have put stuff in, but it was never like I thought of this because I wanted it to be
Yes.
a mirror to World War II. Some people obviously might make the choice to do that, but with him, like he said, it's nothing to do with that. But maybe it was somewhat like that
Yes.
because he lived through it, and it can be
Yes.
quite biographical. And that's the other thing about fantasy is, like I said, is fantasy technically fantasy? It's all just a metaphor, isn't it? It's just a metaphor for reality. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, so like obviously what I have been experiencing will influence what I write about because that's how I perceive reality. So it will influence what I think about a bad ruler. If I am under a dictator and I write about the Lord ruler in the Mistborn, it's gonna probably look a lot like the example of a bad ruler that I have next to me, which is it's great because that means that the more books you read, the more types of reality you are experiencing, like all these authors, what they have experienced, you will experience through those books. So that is, I think that's just great.
Yeah, it's amazing. We can live many, many lives by reading.
Yeah. Um, Going to another thing that is usually said that helps for fantasy is creativity and imagination. So I believe that we are all creators in one way or another. Like we all love either writing or painting or music or just everything we do is just creation. We love creation. So I think one of the reasons why we love fantasy that much is because we are able to experience the creation of another person.
Yeah, we get to see the different ways that people think coming out in creative ways, very creative ways, very strange and weird ways. And like I think from a writing point of view, for me, the feeling of being able to be in control of a world to an extent. I mean, you're never really in control of the world, as you know. There are writing rules, so you can't just suddenly change track in chapter 2. You know, you establish someone as one thing in chapter 2, and then becomes another thing in chapter 3. You know, like or like towards the end of the, and there's like a Deus Ex Machina or something. Like you can't do something like that. But you know, but for the most part, you are creating an organic world. And so yeah, to be able to see other people's creations and what they do, I do
Yeah.
enjoy that. I think you're always looking for a way that the nostalgia can turn into something novel again. You're always looking for that. Like, for example, dragons, you know, you're always looking for the next big dragon story. If you like the dragon trope, and that's the thing about tropes, isn't it? They kind of like allow you to navigate the stuff that you like, but you're always looking for that trope to be done in the new way that you've never thought of before.
Yep, totally. I love books because of that. I'm just fascinated, especially when the world building is really good. I'm just fascinated about it. And one last thing is, yeah, I think a good thing about fantasy is that it helps us, and maybe we have mentioned this before, but it helps us explore the unknown and new possibilities. So what would happen if you have the capital for the Hunger Games? That is what I have been reading recently. So it's in my mind. What would happen if something like Red Rising would be our reality, and what would be the outcome? So it helps you like explore the outcome of a route without having to actually take that route. You know?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And just considering, you know, what it would be like. It's like I said to you earlier. It was like, you know, what if I was in that situation? What would I do? How would I deal with that thing? That choice. How would I deal if I was chosen to be taking part in the Hunger Games? How would you deal with that? And I mean, obviously, I know that's never really going to mean anything, but like it's fun to explore these possibilities, these unknowns, because you know it's strange, isn't it? Because there's this weird illusion that like we have this idea of society, and we have this idea that the world that we live in is going to be like this forever, but like you know, like we know for in real life, like the things can happen that completely change the way that you live. Like you know, my grandparents. They probably started. I mean, they were born in the 20s. They would have thought, you know, everything, you know, the 1920s, which is 100 years ago now. Damn. So yeah,
Wow, that's
basically,
hard.
they they're not with us anymore. But they basically, when they were brought into the world, they wouldn't have been like, oh, one day I'll go to war. They would have just been like, this is normal, this is normal, and all of a sudden, the world was at war, and they had to deal with this
Right.
new world. But we've got this weird idea in our head that we're always going to have this kind of society that we currently live in. And that is why fantasy is good, because it allows us to see what society might look like if something else happened. And maybe that's something, you know, like magic got involved, like science with sci-fi won't move over too, we'll stay in our lane. But either way, the point is, it's the same thing, isn't it? We get to
Yes,
see what would life be like if so and so happened, and what choices would we have to make.
exactly. And how the human nature works, you know, how humans would react to this circumstance that is put to them. Well, when we see history, we see a lot of ways in which humans are reacting to things that we have never reacted to that. We have never reacted to war, and you would say, "Oh yeah, if this happens, humans would surely do this." And you have seen history has proved no, they actually do this other thing. And I think fantasy stories help us see the same. What would naturally happen with humans if they would put on under this situation? And a great author is the one that can go closer to the truth of the human nature in those situations.
And that is something that really scares us about. I think something that scares and fascinates us, all of us, I think, is human nature and how deep do we go. Like that is why yours. I bet you likes. I bet Snow was fun to read. I'll tell you when I've read it. But I bet Snow was really
Very
fun to
fun.
read. Joe Goldberg is fun to read because he is the worst side of human nature, and you're thinking, wow, you couldn't relate to the stuff that they do, but it's still fascinating. It's this morbid fascination that you've got of like how far they will actually go and what they'll do. But then, of course, you've got the other side of the spectrum, and that is heroes, and seeing heroes who push through the hardest of times, who are the kindest of people, who achieve the best things, and the effects that they have. They're always good to kind of follow too. So I think you're right. On both sides of human nature, we are fascinated, and it's
Yeah.
another reason why we read fantasy.
Yeah. um, I think that's it. Do you have anything else you would like to add?
Um, no, I've had a really great time chatting to you about this. Thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah.
And I literally I could talk about this for another 20 hours because it's just one of the most fascinating things. And stories have always been kind of like a big part of my life, and I think stories are important. I think we should keep telling stories, and I think we should keep using stories to grow. And also, I think we should maintain curiosity at all times because that's just how we grow, you know. And try and turn off your confirmation bias sometimes because you see the world better. But and the way we do that is obviously fantasy.
Yeah, that's great. Do you have before it end, do you have a fantasy book that you would recommend? Like if your life depended on it, what would be a book that you
If
would
my life
recommend?
depended on it, one that everyone should read at some point, I'm gonna say it sounds so basic. However, Way of Kings, I love Way of Kings. I read it last year. I'm like you. I'm quite new to kind of like I've only read about 15 or so fantasy books. I'm still like building my mind of my mind. I'm building, I'm ticking off TBR lists. But Way of Kings has gripped me and got my emotional state in a way which no other book has. And I stand by. I mean, this. No, I'm not going to say. No, I will say that. Will say this. I thought Way of Kings was the best Stormlight entry at this, and it's the one because it's the only fantasy book that has made me outright cheer and get very excited, but also made me extremely sad at times. And I think, maybe I could read it. And if anyone who's watching this wants to drop in the comments any kind of suggestions for me to read, I'm always looking to add to the TBR, despite its extremely large. I think I'm not actually, I'm on about 60 books. I could do with more. So if there's any more suggestions.
I'm waiting for summer to hit it. When summer comes, that I'm done with school, I'm just gonna read like crazy. I'm gonna read the whole Cosmere. I'm gonna go crazy.
That's the whole thing. Put yourself out on Brandon Sanderson first, and then we can move on to other stuff.
Exactly. No, I'm trying to do like a balance between the other books that I already have and Brandon Sanderson, because I love Brandon Sanderson, but I know I also have to read other books. It's not only him. There's other great stuff out there.
Exactly. Yeah.
Oh, well, Maxwell, thank you so much again for being here. I really enjoyed this, and I hope we can continue having this YouTube relationship.
I'm sure we can, and listen out soon because your voice appears in. You've made a vocal cameo in one of the upcoming videos. So
okay. Yeah, thank you so much, everyone that watched so far, and see you next time.